Our guest speaker today is Alex McNaughton. Okay, now just a little bit of background to Alex. I've sorted some things out. Alex is one of us. He moved to Port Macquarie in 2017. He has a degree in geophysics and 5 children.
Oh, okay.
God knows how he did that. I don't know how he got the time to do that, mate, with your life. Okay. He's photographed nearly every part of Australia, and he is internationally recognised as a photographer. His work has been published around the world in such media outlets as Reuters, the BBC, ABC, Channel 7s, 9 and 10. This man is no slouch with a camera, okay? So, just to give you a bit of an insight into that, in December last year, Alex received a silver award in mono from the internationally known 360 Awards. He also placed in the top 10 in his mono shot of whimsical wind farms. Come and have a look at it. I'll give you his website address very shortly. Then he received a high commemorative award on his monos of the Jetty and Approaching Storm, and then received a commemorative award on his monos for Field of Dreams. Not only that, but he took out, on that competition, he took out the People's Choice Awards. Not to mention that, if I'm right, I think I'm right, that year there was more postings than any other year that they had.
Yeah, they've never had as many votes for entry as mine.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? How many did you get?
Can't remember. How do you
Come
remember?
on, 642.
Yeah, and they said it was like 10 times what.
Yeah, I voted too.
I tell you what, the funny thing about it, the judge's choice won $2,500. People's choice won a magazine subscription.
They're way
Even though I blew them away in the water, but anyway, you get that.
At least you got some kudos out of it anyway. Okay. Now look, you can also visit Alex's on Alex McNaughton, roamingeye.com. Is that correct? Okay. I would recommend you go and have a look at it. It's a great website. The man can photograph things. He is really, really good. Okay. Very good. Thanks, Alex.
I'll just talk for a minute while Lindy gets the slides up and going. Thank you, John, for that marvellous introduction. I don't know how I live up to all the things that you say. I'm just a fellow photographer, self-taught, and I follow my passion. So that's what I think photography is about. If you're trying to drive yourself into doing something you don't like, I don't think that comes out in your results. I find I get a lot of response from such as the markets and so on, and people absolutely appreciate what I put up, and it's only because I follow what I like to do and make a business out of that. It's probably the reverse of what's common sense, but I think in a creative field like photography, it's the kind of thing that you've got to do. I get tapped on the shoulder for other things, weddings and so on. I have to politely decline. That's not my scene, that's not what I do. And I think there are much better people out there with the right gear and the right approach that would be perfect for that kind of stuff. So I follow my passions, and my passions are outdoors, anything outdoors. Lindy's asked me to do drones and talk about drones, so that's what I've done. She's given me no other guidelines other than that, so you'll have to suffer my talk.
I said, talk to us.
So before I get into stuff, who here has a drone? No drone owners? Okay. Who's here actively researching and thinking they might want to get one? One at the back? Okay. Maybe. Could be tempted, depending on how much it costs and everything else.
Oh no, it's not.
All very reasonable. So at least I know who I'm talking to. I'm not going to lecture to you. I'm not doing that kind of stuff. I'm just a fellow photographer sharing my story. And that story started essentially coming to Port Macquarie with Helen. I had been a passionate geographer as a kid, and I love the landscape and so on, and that's what led me to study and graduate in geophysics, which is a mathematical and analytical way of exploring the world with what you can see and what you can't see. Mining and exploration companies love that because you can find stuff that you can't see. And I find photography, landscape photography, is the visual aspect of that, if you like, so that to me they all are closely and tightly related. So I did have a good opportunity when I was first given a camera. I was 16, 17, and went with my parents on their first overseas trip, and mine too, back in the 70s. It was a brilliant trip. It was all slides and everything else. So here I am, hardly experienced at all, taking film, and you've got to come back with something or other. So that was a really steep learning. Here's your camera, learn it, because we'll need photos of our trip. Fast forward a little bit from that, I got what I believe were interesting and fun shots, and my first entry into a competition was then. It was a crushing, devastating experience. I was dismissed, and they didn't think that the image that I had was, anything of interest. It was a beautiful reflection of the lake and Washington, all that sort of stuff. But I thought it was nice, and I found that experience was so negative. I never went near anything like that for 30 years afterwards.
Really? Wow.
It was terrible. I mean, as a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, I'm into guns and motorbikes, blowing things up and doing all that kind of stuff. So here I am doing a creative thing, and you put that out there, and then when it gets stomped on, you just say, whoa. So fast forward that again. I'll just go back to your references there, a little bit of a potted history. The move here to Port Macquarie was to ultimately escape an emotionally abusive marriage, and I turned to photography after a long layoff. It was one of the things that got crushed in that terrible situation. And I decided to reboot here in Port Macquarie with Helen. And we found a fantastic place to live. It's beautiful, it's got a lovely climate, it's a fascinating area. We can go every direction of the compass and you'll find something very, very nice to be in and look at. And so with the photography being, part of that reboot, it was a risk to put myself out there again. And it was a risk to try and think that with my $500 camera, what am I going to do with that? And I think I had one filter and one tripod. That was probably the extent of the equipment. So we started to set up a market store, smaller size. We didn't have very much. I had Helen's car, Suzuki Swift, everything had to fit in that. The marquee, the table, stock, everything. So we started from scratch. No mentoring, no guiding, no nothing. What works? And so you put stuff out there, couldn't afford very much, see what sells, see what people are responding to, and work on it from there, and have been doing that every year since. So it's been a real learning experience, and I find I do better when I self-criticise my photos and I improve year on year. Every year I go back, I look back and say, you know what, I could have done that image a little bit better, I could have done that a little bit differently. I look at images that I make every second, every day, and I say, well, how does this look? Every now and then, maybe 1 in 100, I sit back, wow, that's really cool. And I really enjoy the pleasure of it, which is what it should be. Getting pleasure from doing the photography. It's part of my self-healing process, and it's part of being a business and driving myself to be good enough for people to want to buy it, and they do, which is really, really rewarding to have that as an outcome. So branching out from that initial camera, I was very much interested in getting drone to give me new perspectives. The drones at the time were stiff-legged things that sat that high and that bulky, and that never really sat well with me. I like to be super portable. I climb around rocks at the seashore, and I do everything that you need to do in a backpack. So when they came out with a folding legs drone, such as this one, this goes down into a very small package, that absolutely said to me, yeah, now's the time to go. And that is a revolution in photography, I feel. It can bring in entirely new perspectives. It could free you of a whole range of limitations. The cost these days of drones, $1,000 to $1,500 is probably what you've got to spend to get yourself a small but highly capable drone, and I'd highly recommend you don't spend any more than that. When you think you like the look of it and it's doing stuff for you, then spend more. I started with one, I've now got 4. That's just a bit of a heads up and a bit of a warning for you.
That's what he tells Helen.
And that's spread amongst 3 different brands, so I don't care about brands. I got 2 different brand cameras. I just look for the tool and I just look for doing the job. I'm not in anyone's pocket or camp or anything else. I just look what's best for the job. So now I have these 2 as my main 2 go-tos, one very small, one very large. And that's deliberately so because I need to be very compact sometimes. I might jump on the motorbike, I might be on the ski, I might be hiking. I need something really small. Then there's my big one, which I call the Beast. It does everything else, but it's a bit more of a lugging arrangement, but it's got some fantastic capabilities. So to give you an idea of the capabilities of the drones, I've taken, last year? 60-odd thousand shots last year. I'm not going to show all of them. Some of the panoramas that I'll show you can be made of up to 300 shots just to get a single image. So some of these images here are made up of 3, 6, 10, 20, and I'll show you the one that is the 300. So I take a lot of shots, and that gives me around about last year 1,006 images that I would be happy to put in my portfolio that people can then browse and purchase. So that's to sort of give you an idea of the sort of image taking, and that's just stills. I'm also doing video. I'm not including any video here today, there's just not time, but it's part of what I feel is the sort of thing that a photographer is especially capable of, which is telling a story, which is ultimately what you're doing when you're taking a photo. You've seen something, it says something to you, you want to capture it, maybe for yourself or maybe to share it, but you're fundamentally telling a story. And so in that vein, I've branched out from that one camera now to doing multiple formats, drone and landscape on tripod, traditional stuff, through to doing video, through to doing 360-degree video, through to putting stuff on Google Maps so people around the world can see the images and be immersed in that. So it's branched out rapidly to being all of those types of things. To support it, you need a lot of computer power, a lot of storage. I won't bore you with that, but you've got to bring everything else up to be equal with it. Otherwise, you're doing a lot of work and you could lose that work. That's not good at all. So to give you a bit of a look at what is, I think, a classic view taken from a drone, here's Western Australia. That was with Helen in May. This is on the western side of the country, of course. We've got the late afternoon sun here. And normally, if you're stationed here looking into the sun, you can get a couple of nice compositions, maybe depending on where you put the sun and maybe if you find something interesting in the foreground, like I found some nice bleached wood and so on. But popping the drone up and then looking back is just brilliant because you can get all this side lighting coming in and you get everything lit up the way that you want. In this case, this is a multi-image stack, and then I merge them together to give you the soft water effect. And then bang, presto. Straight away you've got an instant new image from that location, even if the light wasn't the ideal angle for you standing on the ground, completely reverse it with the drone. So that's the kind of flexibility that I love with
I
it.
just want to know, I'm technologically not up there, but what kind of a camera did you use, the Beast?
That was using this one.
So what kind of a camera does that have here?
This has got a very modest 12 megapixel sensor in it. That's plenty. You'll find that the drone camera sensors are nothing like what you get in SLRs. So if you're addicted to 50 megapixels or you won't get out of bed for anything less than 80 megapixels, the drones aren't for you because of packaging reasons for the size of the sensor and the size of the lens, weight's critical. So keeping them small is the only reason that these things can fly for as long as they do. Weighing them down with larger, heavier stuff works for cinematic movie work, but not for all the other general work.
Could I ask a question? You're saying stacking. Does the drone stay stable enough?
No, it doesn't, and it doesn't need to, though it's very, very good. And this is what I am absolutely blown away with, which is why I've gone to 4 drones. They're such clever machines. With a little bit of time, maybe an hour or two, and I have at Wayne Richards Oval in Port Macquarie that I use for all my testing, all my new gear, all my experimental stuff. I have another drone that lifts payloads, another camera, specialist camera. I take it there first, because if it's going to have a problem, I only want it to be somewhere where I can recover it. And so learning them is really easy. If you go somewhere like that and you push the joysticks around, because they're GPS stabilised, once you take your hands off the controls, it'll sit there. If it's got gusts of winds, it'll rock around a little bit, but it'll sit there. Push the stick forward, it'll move forward until you say, stop, go up. And you move the controls together to coordinate whatever you want to do. But the stability of it is such that you can make a video and have the most gusty winds, it'll be perfectly stabilised. These have 3-axis gimbal stabilisation as well as digital image stabilisation. So it's got a lot of technology behind it. They're clever machines. As far as the stacking process is concerned, part of that is to do image alignment when you've got your images, and you typically do find a little bit of movement between them because you're going to have to get some. And that's not a problem. You just lose a little bit of the border depending on how much there was between it. But they're so good that's only just a small
Yeah, but
amount.
AI is just amazing these days.
They're just such clever machines. So that just gives you an idea of how, in an otherwise a bit of an awkward, inconvenient situation, if you're down on the ground, pop the drone up, look back, perfect lighting.
Where would you be in that picture? Where are you physically?
I was about there, car park's there. I couldn't avoid the car park in this situation. I generally don't like to have things like that in my shots, but I'm here with limited time, so I'm going to get the shot. Okay, let's go next.
Right, now what are the next? Oops.
Share. Maybe an arrow might do it, depending on what you're using. Just use a keyboard arrow. There we go. So here's another classic thing of what you can do with the drone while you're hovering around. Of course, you can look at it in an entirely different way. Top down is a great way to look at stuff. Whereas if you were standing here on the rock shelf or rocky outcrop, you wouldn't see these patterns as clearly as that. And so this is a multi-image panorama stitched, but each one of the sort of tiles that go up to make that panorama to be stitched is in fact a stacked set of images itself. Because I wanted to get the water movement, go click, 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 and then merge, 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 and then stitch that merged result, and then you get that. It's a little bit of computer work, so you do need a computer to help you.
That's where you're going to have the power. You're going to have
That's
that power.
right, that's what you meant.
Yeah.
So that's what I regard the computer as. The computer is the second half of the process. In fact, I've got an analogy that I use to the equivalent to, say, gem cutting and mining. Okay, so you as the photographer is the same as the old timer saying there's gold in the hills. So you understand where to go, where to stand, which way to look. So that's your compositional part of it. Then there's the technical part of it. Okay, so you've got to dig the gold out. How do you dig out without the mountain falling down? So that's the execution. So you've got your stability of the drone, you've got the shutter speeds, you've got all those sorts of considerations. So you must take it in focus image, all that kind of stuff. And the last bit, just like in gemstones, when someone comes to the shop, they want to buy a finished gem on a nice little setting, nice and shiny. That's where your editing and your process comes in to polish that result into the final image that the person at the store, market store, said, oh, beautiful, we'll buy that. So they're sort of your three processes, if you like, in the computer is an essential part of this. Without it, wouldn't be able to do any of that.
I'm sorry, but I need to ask, how do you know it's in focus when you up there and you other side book?
Yeah, it's set to autofocus, so it's already focusing in the centre of the image. You're also so far away from it that depth of field is just a non-issue. Whether it's focusing there versus there, it doesn't matter.
And due to the fact that it's a very small lens.
It's a very
Small lens.
small lens
How big is your lens?
in terms of focal length.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when your camera, you don't have to focus that. Everything's in focus.
How big is the lens?
I think on that camera it's about equivalent to about a 24 mil, 24, 28. So quite wide angle.
Yeah.
And this is what you typically find when you buy your typical drone without spending an awful lot. And I recommend you don't spend an awful lot to start with. You only have wide angle as your choice. That's what it comes with. When you go from 1,000 or 2,000 up to sort of 3,000 or 4,000, they do now have a one with dual lenses. And then when you go from that to an awful lot more, you have genuine optical zooms.
And then you go to Hollywood.
I'm not sure where you go. Okay, let's move on. All right, here's another great thing of where the drone comes in handy. Again, this is in WA. This is Bluff Knoll and Stirling Ranges. Down here is where you'd normally be with your tripod in the mist. You go, oh, that's no good. Pop the drone up. Guess what you can see? That. We're about 400 feet up. So punch a hole through the cloud, look over, perfect. The cloud evaporates in time, but we're here now, we've got this lovely lighting here. It looks a bit like Jurassic Park, doesn't it? Again, bang, straight away we've got a result. Whereas if you're sitting there on the ground waiting 3/4 of an hour for things to clear so you can see what's going on, don't need to wait for that. Okay. Here's another great thing I like with drones is that it gives you a great overview of things. In which case, this is Bustleton Jetty. We can see that there's a storm out there, but I love being able to relate the storm to something over here. I don't like analysing images, but if you did, you'd see there's quite a lot of symmetry. This sort of goes to that, opposite corners to each other, and you can see that related to that. And it gives you a really good perspective of seeing something. I had placed myself down here and I was shooting up against these and that with a dark storm in the background, so all very compressed and very dark. But from up here, we can see the whole landscape. So it's fantastic for that. That's just multi-image panoramas. I go click, 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 click. I just yaw the aircraft around. I leave myself a generous over at 50% at least, so I'd never have any problems with stitching later.
Somebody bent that jetty.
What's that?
Somebody bent the jetty.
Yeah, it does bend things. And here's the other fun stuff. As well as the landscape things that are pleasant to see and are available to sell, there's a couple of aspects to the photography that I'm deliberately choosing to do. And one of them is to use Google Maps as a great way of showing people what there is to see. When I explore a new area, I feel like I want to see what's in an area. First thing I do is go to satellite view, what's available to see. Then I look for any photos that are there, so it gives me an understanding of what there's on the ground. So I've been filling in a lot of blanks in the maps. And I do things like this. Beautiful side lighting here. This is on Central West New South Wales, on the way to the inland. And it's a great angle. Most people drive to the car park. And that's where you'll see relentless. No one's shot on this side of it. Are you kidding me? So fly the drone around. I've got a few different angles, and I pop them on Google Maps. Nice little blue dot. You can see it for yourself, and you can see right round. Not just where the photographer's looking. You can see right round. So it's a great way of sharing stuff and putting out a message, if you like. This is what's to be found here. Next one.
So, okay, stop there. So what does Google Maps do for you?
Okay, Google Maps does two things. First of all, it's a contribution. It's a global platform to contribute your photography that others can see. They can see what's going on. I appreciate when people put photos up because it helps me. So I put hundreds of these photos up on a trip. So it helps others in there. Now, what was previously blank on Google Maps, you'll actually see like a little breadcrumb trail. I drove 6,000 Ks and you'll see my whole trail. So it helps people there. It also helps my business because my username on Google Maps is my website name. And so when somebody does the whole thing and having a look at an image, if they bother to look up in the top left-hand corner, they'll see who posted it. Well, it's my website name. Once they go onto my website, then all things are possible. I show them galleries and links to YouTube, blah, 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 blah. So it's a great means to reach out. It's a great means to reach out to millions and millions of people. Simple as that. And it's easy. You just create a free Google Maps account. The drones have got a 360-degree photo option. Set it up there, press the button. It'll just rotate around, it'll do everything it needs, and it'll assemble a 360-degree formatted photo ready to upload when I'm back in the office, put it into all my different ways I have it to storage and upload that to Google Maps account, and it'll appear in 24, 48 hours. Wow. Simple as that. Simple and free. Why wouldn't you like it?
Right.
Alex, was that one stitched? The previous image, was that stitched?
Let's have a look at the previous one. Just go back. Oh, no, back, the other back.
The other back.
No, not that one. That's just a pure wide angle shot.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
And same with that, I cropped it a little bit because you don't need to see boring houses. But again, this is never Tyre, another country out Western New South Wales. It's an angle that people, the main road's there, they're just looking from the other side. Why not go around the other side with a drone? Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to make a big jump here and do some other types of drone shots. This is part of a series I did of Central South Australia. This is called the Painted Hills. This type of geology gets repeated a few times as you go up towards the Northern Territory. The Painted Hills are on Anna Creek Station, world's biggest station. You can only get there by plane, and you can only get that plane out of William Creek. So it takes a little bit to get to it. Anyway, I got the plane booked, just been on the plane, so I had my time here and I flew the drone, and I've got these kinds of zoom panoramas that I did with it, which is quite refreshing and interesting compared to pure wide angle, and in that I can then choose the landscape as I want it and come out. Again, this is a stitched image panorama, click, 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 bang, done, and an entirely pleasant view. Right, next.
Unusual.
And another way of looking at the same thing is to look down. because there's so many interesting patterns in this landscape. You can go in virtually any direction and you'll find something interesting. So I've been making a bit of a mission of doing a trawl through my portfolio in the past year and cutting out strips where I see interesting patterns or colours, and I've made a set of scarves out of them and been selling them. And so scarves are wonderful ways of making your image work for you in another way. It's always been a standard photo. Find a strip that's got colours or patterns to it, and that just comes out really nice on fabric. And you can make them larger too. You can see how much there is to work with. I could go through my images that I've taken and I could do one that way, one that way, one that way, one that way. So much I could do with it. And again, that just shows you how wildly varying the landscape is. So again, another top-down shot. I just simply flew in a straight line going click, 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 click until I decided I wanted to do something different. Then back in editing, I say, oh, I like the middle, 3 or 4, stitch them. I like 4 to 7, let's stitch them. And out of that, one session, just one glance and batteries, I can generate dozens and dozens of images. Infinite choice. So this is salt pan country, and is another great way of using a top-down shot to give you some perspective. This gives you the visual of the salt pan, but also by putting the road at the bottom, you've got some sense of scale and size. Otherwise, without it, you're trying to sort of guess, is that 100 metres wide, 500 metres wide? How would we know? So it's good to be able to sort of do that every now and then to give something scale. I sometimes use people in my photos, not very often, and usually about this big, just to give it a sense of scale and perspective and context.
So I'm sorry.
Also gives an effect of volcanic.
Yes.
Looks like a volcano.
Ah, yeah, true.
So typically, okay, perfect weather, how high would you go?
There is a maximum legal height that you're allowed to go, and I'll go through sort of drone-specific things like that. It's 400 feet above your takeoff point. I never ever bust that. There are a set of simple drone rules, and I follow them all except one, and I'll relay that later, as I have to. Safety at all times. And safety means never intruding into airspace that's not yours. There's a whole definition of airspaces, and there is meant to be a buffer between them, but it doesn't really exist because the definition of your height is relative to your takeoff point. You could start off with high cliff and fly it from there, be well inside where a plane might go past. So there's a whole range of considerations. As a guide, I find a lot of the landscapes that I take would be around 100 metres, so 300 feet. Makes me a good view over the ground. But sometimes when you're faced with a structure that's very large, you're never going to be able to see it all just running 300 feet. So you can't go up. Otherwise you're busting your airspace. Don't do that. It's very bad. So you've got to fly along, and you've got to fly in such a way that you can join all those things up to be a larger image. Look as though you're up about 3,000 feet, but you're not. You're only 300 feet. And you're getting the detail of your 12 megapixel thing just being one small part of the image, and you can build up a much bigger, highly detailed, complex image that way. And here's the other fun stuff to do. You could just look at patterns and juxtapositions and adjacencies. So we're just moving on to a salt pan and coming backwards and forwards. So that is being made into a scarf too. So the photography that I put out for sale is a tough one to try and work out. It is by outdoors photography, but everyone's taste is different. You follow, your nose as to what appeals to you as to be a photograph. And the same thing for things for sale. Simple as that. And here's another classic case. Again, this is a multiple image stack, but again, we can look at the beach and the shore and the waves and the watercolour and the vegetation all in one nice little strip. And here's one that's almost impossible to do without a drone. This is Maree, so this is on the way to Birdsville. Got up early that morning, knew the full moon was setting, classic time of the morning when you've got that and you've got the pre-dawn colours. If I was stuck on the ground, I'd be hard pressed to do much with that moon. If you're going wide angle, of course it's going to be this big. That's not very much fun. If you go zoom, well, as you know, a zoom photo with the moon becomes more interesting if you put it up against something. I was discussing at lunch how I like to use Taking Point Lighthouse and people there as nice silhouettes of the moon. It just really brings things in nicely. But with the drone, I'm free of all that quandary that I was in down there. So I can just fly, what's it, about 1.5 km out of town, look back and bring it all together. So I've got the moon, a pleasant size. You can see there's a town there, and I can bring it all together. Again, with the zoom drone, it just gives me options. Here's the other fun stuff. This is a bit later at the Simpson Desert, just near Birdsville. And this is where you use a wide-angle lens, and you're bringing in distortion, but you're using the distortion. That's a linear feature, it's a straight line. But when you're looking at it with the drone, with the wide-angle lens, and you look that way, you look that way, and you look that way, you've got 3 different perspectives, and you put it all into one. Of course, something's got to give. So you wouldn't use this for architectural shots, because a building with curves doesn't look odd. But with this landscape, I quite like it because it shows up the foreground really nicely. I don't care whether that was originally straight or not. All I'm showing here is desert, and we can see a succession of dunes behind it. So, you know, being able to get the edges of that all nicely in place, and that says, bang, you know, the sun's coming up, and this is what the desert looks like.
Yeah, the curve makes it very pleasant to look at.
Yeah, it's just creative fun, and that's all photography is. It's creative fun. You've got to create. Everyone has their own taste, and this is the other way of looking at it. So again, with the drone up about 100 meters, 300 feet, with the zoom this time, I can get the light on successive dunes. So that is also yawing from left to right, but being so far away, you don't see that distortion. It just magically goes away. So you're left with them as their proper sort of linear features. So that's a great way of just using the drone to give you a shot that you couldn't get, because if you're at ground level, you know, the best you could do is look to the next dune. You wouldn't be able to get the sense of seeing them all. And here's another variation. So we're looking slightly sideways now, a bit closer, so the dune's a bit more prominent, but then shrinking away. So then we can bring in some more of the foreground, a bit more interesting. The sun's still low enough that we've got some interesting shadows, but we're now seeing more of the landscape lit up itself. So that's a zoom one. And a vertical zoom, don't ignore them. I had to hike up here first thing in the morning, carrying all the gear. Stopped about 3 times because it's deep sand, and launched it up here because it was really a bit of a rush to get these shots so that I got the nice edges on the dune.
So where are you standing there?
Oh, I'm standing about here. This is Big Red Dune, which is a famous one. It's where the main track that crosses the Simpson Desert goes. And what I didn't know when I went there was that it's all part of private property. It's all part of a station, and I had in mind because I have a motorbike with me as well, just to go up there for as far as I felt like, and just explore around, see what I could see. But when I found out that the national park itself is 2 hours into the desert, I didn't want to ride my bike 2 hours up and down. It's a lot of work. So I just restricted myself to a couple of dunes here, and I've got that nice sort of vertical panorama. So again, I went to the outback simply because there was so much rain and everything else. It was really coming alive. But you don't get to see much when you're at ground level. You're driving along here, all you see is a few trees and bits and pieces either side. Pop the drone up, as I did endlessly, and bang, you've got this fantastic panoramas in front of you. So I can capture the greening up of the desert, I can capture all the landforms that happen, I can capture the sky that's going at the moment. And I just did this relentlessly. You can't tell on the ground what it's going to look like. So just stop, fly, look around, take photos, bang, drive a little bit, stop, fly, and just keep going, and then just see what you capture and throw the net out. And if you looked at this is near Windora, Channel Country. If you looked at this in current satellite view, that is just dirt and sand. These are the sand dunes that are prominent on satellite view that stand up, but they are made up of the same material that is all of this. That's how much water it's had, and that's how much it's greened up, which is why I wanted to go to get this kind of shot. And again, this is just a very random stop. I was on the way down the Lightning Ridge. Pop the drone up. Ah, look at that. Fantastic little spotlight. You couldn't tell that. I was hundreds of meters away from that on the road. But look at that. Bang, presto, nice little spotlight. Just a random stop. So in Channel Country, it's an interesting part of the world. There's, on satellite view, nothing here but orange, red sand, dirt. But I'd seen the work of a couple of photographers up here that were putting out all these crazy images, and they had different other colours. They were a little bit earlier in the year than me, a good 6 or 8 weeks earlier. I could only get there when I could get there. But I had seen from the images, clearly there's something to see here. Normally there's a beautiful town that I just go through. But now I'm going to spend 2 nights there because I've got to get this stuff. And you don't know what the weather will be, what the light will be or anything else, so you've got to give yourself maximum chances. So I allocated 2 nights. And I'm glad I did, because in the first day we had, mottled cloud and mixed lighting and everything else. And that's not too bad, because it gives you some nice compositional possibilities when you're looking at the landscape. It's not all just uniform. At other times, like the second day, I wanted uniform because I wanted a very even single exposure over the whole scene. So 2 days at least, lucky, I just got the lighting that I wanted. So this is a wide angle panorama, and that gives me the great ability to go from the foreground to relating to the background. You can see how big these things are. If you don't have that, you're sort of, well, 50 metres, 150 metres, you're not really sure. Alrighty. And so the other way of looking at it, swap to the zoom lens on the same drone, and you can look at it entirely different way. I can zoom right in on this little picture from that low angle and just concentrate on the tendrils and everything else, really emphasising the fact that this is channel country, this is where the water's flowing, this is where everything is happening. This is the 300 image shot. Doesn't look like it, but it is. This is K1.5 maybe, from top to bottom, and there's 300 images that go into that. And the only way that you get that to work for you is to have very systematic flying. Fortunately, in the drone that I use for that, and the controller that it's got all the software built into it, so I can just go from flying ad hoc and just go click, 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 to here's a mission. There's a grid that I want you to cover, this is the extent of the grid, this is the horizontal and lateral overlaps that I want you to do, press the button, uploads all the details of the drone, flies off there, click, 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 and just goes backwards and forwards until it's ready to come home, or runs out of batteries, whichever happens soon. So that's 19 kilometres of flying on one set of batteries that day. To start there, go all the way down, turn around, go up the next little strip, 19 kilometres of flying.
So how wide would those channels be?
Hard to say. These are trees, these little dots here are trees, so I'd be guessing 15 metres, 20 metres.
Right.
And it looks as though you're taking it from several thousand feet,
Yeah.
but it's not. 300 feet. And you'll see, I'm now zooming into, I'll zoom into this area, and you'll see that all the detail there. Then we zoom into, again, the next slide, and we're zooming in again, we've still got all the detail in it. So that's just, go back. So that's just a tiny little portion of the original image. You see, it's still got all the detail in the world, because that's probably 2 or 3 shots just in that. So that's 36 megapixels. So it broke Lightroom's limits. Couldn't handle the file that size. I had to dumb it down twice just to squeeze it within Lightroom. Lightroom is what I use to organise my photos and do the final edit. I branch out to Photoshop every now and then to do some special stuff, but poor Lightroom couldn't handle 2 gigabytes in size. It was huge. Computer had a good workout too. Here's the other fun stuff. You remember that distortion that we got on the dunes? Exactly the same thing's happening here, but we can bring in the foreground to us. Now this is a straight line from that island down the sand spit, but it looks as though it's curved. It looks as though this is really close, which it really is when you're sort of aiming the drone, then aiming that's further away, which is why you get that distortion. But it brings in that whole water depth process, if you like, to go from here to eventually off into deep water and appreciate what that is. I had a polarizing lens on this time just to help me with the reflections and with the colours and the contrast. You can see a little bit of that in the sky where it goes from blue to white because it's covering such a large lateral extent through the band of polarization. But it brings up the foreground really nicely.
Where's that at?
That's Longford Island or Langford Island. It's near Hayman Island, which is just sort of behind, just over from there.
Yeah.
So it's popular with everyone because it's easy to get to. Airlie Beach is about 20 or 30 k's that way, so I jet skied over to here and I was on my way out to the outer reef. But you've got to get this at the right tide. Between here and here, there's a bit of a bay, but it's only a couple of metres deep. If you go up low tide, it's just brown, dry rock, very boring. But if you go sort of mid-tide, you get the sand spit appearing and you get nice water depth there. But when I went there the first time, I was at the wrong tide. was a bit disappointed. I had to come back again the next day.
Nice.
So again, wide angle shot, Whitehaven Beach, and you can see how well that brings in something that's virtually underneath your feet. The emphasis that I wanted here was the pattern of this outflow of the river up, not like a river, but that bay up to there, and I made that foreground prominent, and you would make it prominent with a wide angle panorama. And then swap to the zoom lens, and you get an entirely different look. So now we can bring in the landscape, instead of being far away and small, we're now going to bring it to be prominent and bring it into part of the scene. And when we zoom in again on the next one, bang, you can really start to see where that goes, and you can start to really bring it in. Again, this is all from the one drone. I'm fortunate that it's got multiple sensors and multiple lenses on it. So having this kind of flexibility when you're there means that on the one set of batteries, you can get so much out of it. And again, a wide angle shot, this is now behind Yeppoon. A lot of fast moving cloud here, so you can never quite get everything lit up perfectly the way you want because it's constantly changing and moving, and you've only got so many minutes flying time, so you've got to sit there hoping for the best. In which case, I was able to bring in this whole lagoon and bring in the volcanic formations, which are part of the same chain that the Glasshouse Mountains are part of for the same reason. There's a north-south extent of it. But when you swap to zoom view and wait for the clouds to move a bit, say bang, beautiful big highlight, zoom right in, got it, bang, done and dusted. I've got some nice ground shots of that too, so you can use a normal camera with a tripod and get those kinds of shots, but not so much all of the background. And again, then that is in shadow, and this is in sun, so again, just another perspective while you're there. Go for it until the batteries say you've got to come home. And so a nice riverscape here in the Upper Murray. I'd been with a group of friends and we'd gone from Albury to Kenkoban and back, Kenkoban up in the bottom of the Snowy, so that was 400 k's of jet skiing over 2 days. And I saw this on the way back, we're heading back, and once I said, to the guys, goodbye, and we were all done at the end of the Sunday, I raced back to the closest launch off point, screamed down the river to get to this point. The jet ski sort of down here on this little spit of land, and popped the drone. I also did a lot of tripod shots there with the video format, and bang, you couldn't get there any other way. With the ski and with the drone, I had this beautiful riverscape in front of me.
Lovely.
And bringing it closer to home, what can it do for places that you're familiar with? So here's a nice view that you can't easily get without being in a plane. But at least here with the drone, I can sit here for as long as I like and get the multiple shots that I want to merge them in to give me that nice soft water effect, so I can just have that nice zoom panorama. And then you can start to bring in storms and interesting things. I love the lighthouse, but it gives you a nice point of focus. You can always relate to it really easily. Alrighty. So here's another fun outcome from the Outback trip. You're driving for miles and hours on roads, nothing to see. Well, there's never nothing. Nothing is something. Nothing is the absence of something. So we look at it a different way with the drone. We can pop it up, and I made a whole stack of these. So this is just my pick out of a whole bunch that I made. But again, like I was saying earlier, photography is telling a story. So this is telling the story. We're going from tar roads, trees, nice greenery. And we were working away until we got dirt. Dirt and dirt, that's it. The little bit in between is where the RFDS uses some remote sections of roads as emergency landing strips. So it's got a runway number. And I did a straight line version and I did a curvy version. So this is actually right near where I took that shot with that highlight of those trees. You might remember the little spotlight. Yeah. So, when you're driving down in a little narrow channel like that, all you can see are just trees, how would you know? And you could just be driving for hours and have nothing to see. Well, there is. Pop the drone up, have a look. And then you can do other fun things like just making a vertical panorama of that and adding that to all the other ones you took. Then you realise, okay, we've got some nice little set here, so we've got from there to there to there, and we've got some nice curves to play with as well as those straight line ones. So it's all about milking it for as much as it's worth. You spent the time driving, you spent the time on the fuel. Why aren't you taking or getting more out of it for your hours there? Not when you get to your destination. So I'm going to branch off from the classic sort of landscape shots and show you a little bit more of other things I do with the drone. I do some volunteer work with national parks and Orca to help them with whale entanglements. It's an issue where they get ropes caught around them from nets and lines down crab pots, this kind of stuff, gets stuck around their fins. It endangers their lives. So I get a call from Lee, the whale spotter, and he gives me the heads up. I think I've got an entangled whale situation. Can you come down? And then with the drone, I'm A, allowed to fly as close as I like, and B, with the zoom, I can zoom in anyway. But finding them can be very hard. When they're dark coloured back and it's dark coloured water and they go in, you can look at them and they just disappear in front of your very eyes. So going at 1, 2 or even 3 Ks, which is why I've got to break a couple of these, or this one rule, and I'll explain it later. It can be very hard going because you've got limited flying time with the drone. It's something you've always got to remember. And so with time, you get an appreciation for wind strength, endurance, time needed. And just like flying where you leave a fuel reserve in your calculations, I leave a battery reserve, that's my 0 point, and I fly according to that, and I always bring my baby home. So hunting them in the ocean, so to speak, can be really tough. Now this is a bit of a grainy shot, it's a screenshot of a screenshot, but this is with a thermal camera that's on the larger drone because it's one of the several sensors that it has. And this gives me an edge in finding the whales fairly quickly. We can see they're visible here in this thermal view. I can colour code this, I just like the black and white and black versions. These are the patterns that's left as they swimming just underneath the water. Visually you wouldn't see that because it's a dark water situation, dark coloured back, you're not going to see it. Heat-wise, I can pick that up in the thermal camera. It'll pick up 0.1 of a degree Celsius temperature difference between objects. So I can see their tracks and bang, up they pop.
So they warm the water as it got past.
Warm the water enough for the thermal camera to pick it up. And I can say, they're down there. Whereas you just went on visuals, you go, and you see another one there, and then on the next one. So you can see the same idea. Isn't that incredible?
That is incredible.
It's just enough to give you an edge. It's just enough to help you get the shot, and when you've got very limited time, and it's a fatal mistake to say, I'll just hang out a bit longer, a bit longer, a bit longer. No, don't do that. Work out the cut-off point, go home.
How long would you usually have on a good day?
What's that?
How much flying time on a good day?
That is a hard question to answer because it depends on so many factors. It varies with the drone, but it very much varies on the wind and what it's doing and how hard you're pushing. It's a bit like driving a car. You know, if you're going uphill a lot, you're putting your foot down, you're going to get worse consumption than just going along on the flat and steady. As a guide, as a practical guide, modern drones are giving you 30 odd minutes of flying under practical conditions. They quote stuff on the website, which is a bit like fuel consumption in cars, the most optimistic are the most optimistic, but that gives you tons of time.
So have you got a fuel gauge on, like a battery gauge on?
Yeah, you do have a percentage left,
Right.
but that isn't hard number. You can't say, well, it will therefore go this distance because the wind could be doing something very different out there compared to where you're standing. It might be a lot more, and it is a lot more hard work. Some of the other tests that I do when I get a new drone is I use Lighthouse Beach, fly into the wind until I go reach the 50% battery point and then come back, knowing that it's less work to do that, and I look at the relative difference, and then I start to build up a bit of an appreciation for the percentage difference, upwind versus downwind, and how this particular drone performs. Over time, you start to get a feel for whether you go a K out or 2K out or 3K out, and then how long you stay there. The bigger drone, unlike the other typical smaller ones, gives me the wind strength and direction where the drone is.
Oh, really?
So that's a really good thing to have. It's oh gee, it's really coming strong out there.
Right.
So if you've got to come uphill, so to speak, on the way home, come home early. But you'll only sort of build up an appreciation for that after you're using it, and then you'll just see what the relative percentage of the battery's uses are. But always leave your margin. People lose their drones because they stay out and then they just don't make it.
So Alex, did you go to drone school or you just learned this from trial and error?
Learn it through just using it, purely using it. So when I would go down to Lighthouse Beach and I would sometimes choose like really strong winds, like a 40-kilometre-hour wind. So I wonder how you'll go. How far can you go? I'll choose the hardest bit. I'll fly into the wind, and I'll choose the 50% battery that's turnaround mark because it'll be easier flying home. And I've got 6 Ks on that larger drone, doing 80 kilometres an hour into that wind. So it can really point along.
Ground speed or air speed?
Ground speed, GPS.
Oh.
It screams along. So you've got to look at all those factors which are highly variable, and you build up an appreciation of that over time. Sometimes you can come back and say, oh, I only had that much left, that was a little bit cutting it fine, but because you left that much, you could get away with that. So next time, you sort of, and I remember the wind was really strong that time, so I'll cut that a bit less the next time. So it doesn't take long to sort of get a feel for how long you should be out there or how far you should go. Another sideline, so to speak, and everyone's into photography for different reasons, but I like to highlight what man is doing in the environment. I'm not a green or environmentalist or anything else like that, but I think one of the great things that photography can do is to communicate. And communication of a key image at times in the historical context it proves a catalyst to conditions that are already there. I think back to key images of the Vietnam War, the Tasmanian conservation situation, a beautiful shot of a river and the swells in the water, and people galvanised around that, and a particularly one horrific one of Vietnam napalm strike and so on. People was coming out. These key images, in the context say, we've got to do something. So this is where I think a sideline, which I don't sell these images, they're just things that I do as I go around. I like to bring out what's hidden. And if you do a satellite view, you can certainly find things like gold mines. But when you do street view and you look at it, say, oh, this is hidden behind a big berm. They've built this up so people driving backwards and forwards by that never see this. Say, there's no way I'm going to accept that. So I fly up and over it. Not only take that shot, I drop it on Google Maps. So all the tens of millions of Google Map users can now see what's going on. Not just satellite view, but what's really going on the ground. I'll go back just one. So I really was lucky with this in that the little island, the vegetation that was left just happened to be highlighted. Yeah. And so it's emphasised like this is the little bit of oasis, look what's happening here. Now I get it, we all need energy, we all need materials, water and products and so on and so forth. Of course we do. But we've got to be a little bit careful about how we go about it. We've got to clean up our, it's the only place we've got to live. That's it. There's no planet B as the saying goes. And all the astrophysicists and astronomers and so on tell us through their scientific reasonings, based on a formula that was created some years ago called the Drake equation, we can take what appears to be an infinite number of stars and we can start adding multiplication factors. There's 7 terms in this one equation. And when you start doing that, you've got to take guesses. We don't have other planets with life on it to give us hard numbers. So you say, well, maybe 0.1% of stars have planet, maybe 0.1 some, or maybe 10%. You can play with numbers all day, and you come up with some range of possible other planets. It turns out to be not much. Not much, yeah. And there's the distinct possibility where it, as far as we could possibly see. And when you're, of course, looking at the stars, you're looking back in time. Things that were 10,000 years ago, 10 million years ago, not even there. And if you think of our situation now on the planet Earth, we've got the likes of Putin, who's invaded just a neighbouring country, minding their own business, and there's no mention the nuclear word. I mean, are you kidding me? Yeah. This is the kind of thing that puts us back to the Stone Age. So our little bit, we can swink out and no one would ever know we were there. So this is why we've got to keep a careful eye on what we're doing. And so I take on a little sideline as this, and so wherever I can, I will just highlight what we're doing, just to understand this is, do we really want to do this or not? I think photography is a great channel and a great medium. Google Maps is a great platform, global, free, accessible, to communicate this kind of message. So with a little thing like a drone, if you could just be bothered stopping, parking, flying for 10 minutes, you can add. Yep. So this is literally the next valley, 10 minutes driving. This is what we all appreciate. This is what we love. This is what's happening just over the hill. We've got to be careful. And similarly, this is up at Gladstone on the way back from the Whitsundays. I knew Gladstone had a lot of industry, so I actually set aside a couple of nights there because I wanted to get it all, see what's going on, and we can see where we have classic, beautiful things that we all like, and then say, what the heck's going on there? Now, I know certain processes have certain ways of working and everything else, but again, it's just a process of saying, well, this is what's going on, this is what's hidden. You don't see these things without a drone. Do we want this? This is hidden behind it. This is a huge wall. It's just like massive. But I can fly the drone up and have a look and say, what's that about? In the middle of this beautiful countryside.
What they're tailing dams, are they?
That's an alumina smelter refinery. That's tailing dams. I'm not quite sure from what. I could look up the company name and see exactly what their business was about, but I saw that in the satellite there. So, what's this little bit of ugliness?
Aluminium. It's aluminium, I think.
Could be, because this is that refinery there, and that's one of its horrible things. You can see, otherwise, we're looking at beautiful blue ocean and nice stuff, and then we've got this right next to it.
And the reef in the ocean.
And the same here, you know, at a landscape photographer's eyes, it's, oh, beautiful, you know, into the hills, blah, blah, and then that. And that's got a berm too, you won't see that from the road. You've got to fly. And again, you know, a photographer's point of view is, oh, you know, nice, you know, serpentine pattern with this, and then we got that. We just do. I think the move away from coal is a definite thing. We will have difficulty with rising energy prices and so on, but we can't keep going.
What was this one?
This is solar panels. We can't keep going just digging up the ground and burning stuff. And what do you do with the ash, you know, as well? So solar is one of the things that are being proposed, but they take up an awful lot of room, and the room's got to come from something. They're relatively inefficient in terms of energy production, and so they take up huge acreages at a time. It's part of the mix. I don't think there's any single universal solution because everywhere is different, distance and populations and energy needs are all different.
What do we do with them when that image?
Where are we going to dump them?
Where are we going to dump
Put
them?
it back to the storage, yeah.
So you can see how big they get. And this is nice productive farmland, so presumably someone's sold something that doesn't grow stuff anymore, but you need energy too. But photovoltaic cells are the way to go. Well, it's just part of our process of getting ourselves to a better place. But they get big. There are quite a few of them.
Where was that at?
Can't remember where that one is. Might be out near Nevertire.
Very rich soil.
Yeah, it is. And I've just.
Good farmland.
I'd have to look at my notes. Again, just showing the juxtaposition between its trillion solar panels and otherwise it's farmland.
They take up some room, don't they?
I sure do. So, wind farms.
Talk about ugly.
I don't particularly ever find anything pleasant of looking at them, but they're there. And you alluded to the whimsical wind farm image, and I'll show you some fun that you can have.
That's where you got
to replace it. And there's a lot of feelings about that, one way or the other, by a lot of people. So I thought I'll put on my photographer's hat and I'll make a concerted effort to get the break wall at all kinds of different angles and lightings and everything else. In this case, I wanted to concentrate on the vertical aspects of it so we could see the alignment, we could see the distances and proximities and so on. So I think part of the photography mission is to inform people. Get away from the emotion. What are we talking about? How close are these things? What distances can you get away with before you have to destroy things, etc., etc., etc.
Tell us from there, what are they planning on doing?
Going to widen it all up.
Take all the rocks.
Are they going to take away the rocks?
And they're talking about widening the path,
Yeah.
and they're
So
also
take
talking
away
about
the
a
trees.
whole bunch of trees.
All of them got garden
Which is very hard to understand when you look at the width that you can go before you can go anywhere near a tree. And then there's the whole emotional aspect of what the rocks represent. But without taking any sides, and I can see pros and cons for everything, just putting my photographer's hat, so I'll take a whole bunch of different images from different angles and perspectives, throw it out there, and let's discuss it. Let's see what everyone feels about this. So I did a vertical one as well, so you can measure things and you can see things. Okay, I understand that now. And again, different perspectives giving you different views of things. So last shot, whimsical wind farm. So what do you do with these things? Well, have a bit of fun. And so I've obviously done a little bit of processing on this to make it a sepia type look. I thought, well, I'll just go all the way. I don't like doing over processing. It's just not my style. Everyone's got their own style. It's just a thing. It's what you like to do. So for my landscape shots, I take care of balancing highlights and shadows and bringing things out and emphasising a few different parts, but basically leaving it as I shot it. I always shoot it probably with a bit of underexposure, so I never overdo it. So that way I can choose at editing exactly what I want to do. So as long as you don't not blowing out your highlights, you've got those kinds of options. Here I thought, I'm going to have a lot of fun, and so I threw everything at it. So I made the image a composite image, but I threw a whole bunch of random shots. So I just sat there with the drone and click, 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 as the things that lazily go around. Let's do the thing. There's no ideal photograph.
When I saw that, I thought that was you'd taken a tripod shot, right, and then just kept going bang, 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 bang.
I just sat there with the drone doing the same thing. Because I could pop it up at the height that the master was at.
Right, of
and
course.
just look at it, whereas you'd be down here.
Yeah, you couldn't do it, that's right. Yeah.
So that's the wonderful thing about the drone. I sort of toyed with the idea of maybe flying through it, but I don't know.
Well, it brings up the question, how's an osprey going to fly through?
That's right.
That's exactly the problem.
They've probably got better eyes and flying than I do.
Lots of people get killed.
But he was a bit of fun. I thought, well, and I think there's also an aspect that you can find in photography. You can make something out of nothing if you feel like it. And so I just took a whole bunch and then, I'll take 15 shots out of the middle and put them together, and then gave it the nice, funny, bit of thing out the edge and threw that out. And I've had people say, sometimes, that looks like dandelions, and sometimes that looks like dragonflies. So I've had a few different, comments of what it looks like to them, but that's a little bit of fun, just right at the end. So that was just me sharing, my story for the last year and the kinds of things that I do with drones and how much I have enjoyed using them and why I like using them. I think you could probably see from that sample of images the range of possibilities opens up enormously. Compared to what you can do on the ground. It's just staggering. I don't see them being anything other than a traditional camera as far as image taking is concerned. The resolution is plenty good enough. As you can see on that 300 shot, I could blow that up the size of the wall for this whole room and you still see detail. It's that detailed. But single shots, not so much, because you're looking at 12 megapixels for most of them, 20 megapixels if you're lucky. So there's going to be limitations of what you could do with a single image. As you can see, you can get very creative and do composite merged and panoramas, stitched to your heart's content, so you can build bigger ones out of that. So it's been a lot of fun for me. It's opened up whole new fields. I make my own little contribution to Google Maps and show people what's out there, and I hope with the postings that I do here on the different pages and so on, people should appreciate where we live and why we live here, and make correct decisions as to what we value and how we go about it. Some of the things that I do on Google Maps is some of the housing developments, which I don't much like the way they simply carve up the landscape and eliminate all trees and just whack in houses like it's in a city. I think that's excessive. But again, I'm just putting up spots and documenting the progress and documenting the process and the results. And we all need to see what's going on, and sometimes these things aren't easy to see unless you're flying.
Well, Alex, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for listening to me, I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks very much. This is yours, mate.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, reluctant one today. Thank you.
Driving through the New York rain, roll down my window and let the rain in. You call me by my name, too late to turn home. We chase the night away. Come on, come on, come on, come away. Let's dance to whatever, something to remember. Come on, come on, come on, come away. Make me change. Come along, come along, come along, come away. Let's dance to whatever, something to remember. Come along, come along, come along, come away. Make me unravel, forget what the matter. I go on forever.
I don't want to